it's Tracy. Welcome to my home here in Sussex, England. March is here, and that means it's time to start spring decorating. But before I dive into this year's plans, I always find it helpful to look back at past projects for ideas. So in today's episode, I'm sharing a collection of spring decorating inspiration to help you plan your own decor for the season ahead. Put the kettle on, get your feet up, and enjoy. Spring decorating, I always love to head to my local garden centres. There's not a lot of clippings available to me in the garden in March, so getting out to these places gives me loads of choice. I can really think about the colour schemes that I'm going to use. I like to take the spring bedding and before I put it outside, I like to use it indoors. It's far more economical than going out and buying fresh cut flowers. They just die, whereas these are going to live on for years. In fact, these are now planted up, these polyanthus, in the garden. I also like to go out to my charity shops, have a good mooch around and see if any particular items jump out at me, if they inspire a colour scheme. This one did in particular. And I was really fortunate on this one to have found these linen effect curtains, a pair of them for just £5. So I knew instantly I could do something with those. From time to time, I might pop over to Home Sense and have a little rummage around there. I particularly hit the candle stash to see what is reduced, and maybe the odd tea towel and things, but I don't tend to do it as much these days. I much prefer my thrifting. Now, a local supermarket is always a good hunting ground, particularly for the likes of gypsophila, because of course these flowers will dry back naturally and then you can use them again and again and they will go through not just spring but they'll go through into summer. I've even used gypsophila at Christmas time, so it's a very economical flower to buy at the supermarket. Now I've got the curtains back home and I was so pleased with this find, just £5 for all this material. So the first thing to do is to get them prepped and get them into the washing machine, give them a really good clean before I went on to do anything with them. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was my spring decorating. It was actually my winter styling. This pot started off like that and they just shot up. They're narcissus bulbs, but they got really floppy. So time to take the table apart and get prepped for spring. I'm a waste not, want not kind of girl. And these narcissus bulbs, well, there's no way they were just going onto the compost. I actually planted them up in the field in this little small area here. I put all the bulbs and things that I've lifted out of the decorations just to give them another chance of life. As you can see at this time of year, there's not a huge amount going on in the field. However, the pussy willow is just starting to come into bud, so that's always useful to take clippings for the house. This is Bertie, if you've not been here before. He is the furry supervisor, aka Sticky Boy. In this part of the field, I planted tulip bulbs that I lifted from my cut flower bed. And I thought, oh, fabulous, they're all starting to grow. Then the deer came through and they ate the lot. They left the daffs, but they ate the tulips. Now, for transplanting the polyanthus, I find the easiest way to do any small planting is in a wheelbarrow. Just tip the compost in and it saves all the spillage and it also saves your back as well, so you're not down on the floor. I've measured out the quantity that I need for the table and I've actually got a few left over, so let's get to styling. Pulling the chairs back when you're about to style a table just makes it so much easier to manoeuvre around it. The Hessian runner here actually came from one of my thrift hauls, just £5 for a huge length of it from a charity shop. And yes, I am using a tape measure here. I always do it just to make sure that runner is in exactly the middle of the table, particularly if the design is going to be there for some time. I've pre-marked the exact center point of the board so I can line it up with the exact center point of the table. It's all about the detail. I save all my offcuts of ribbons and I use them again. I particularly love this little rustic one. I think it's perfect for this type of decorating. This pot at the end was just looking a little bit too big in comparison to the others, so I took that one away and then spaced everything out. I then decided to add saucers to the underneath of the pot, so of course I could keep on watering them, because if I didn't put the saucers there, it was going to end up a hot mess. I love decorating with gypsophila, or baby's breath you might know it as. Evidently the name comes from the smell of the flowers. They're supposed to smell like sweet sour milk, representing that of baby's breath. I don't know. I don't really pick up that scent off them, but that's where the name came from, evidently. I used this on the table without any water because I wanted it to dry back. And when it dries back, it changes from a bright white to a very soft cream colour. I thought the size of this tray would make a great template to make placemats. So the curtains went through a very hot wash just to make sure they were super clean. I just used tailor's chalk to go around the tray to mark out the size of each placemat. Up to this point in time in life, I've never invested in proper fabric scissors. So knowing this project was coming up, I did buy some off Amazon. Prior to that, I'd just been sharpening my old kitchen scissors on folded up tin foil. Now, at the time I was making these, I was a self-confessed non-sewer. Didn't have a sewing machine, didn't have a clue how to do it. But I knew I wanted to make these placemats, so I used the fraying technique. I always think if you don't know how to do something in life, then just find a workaround. And in this day and age, there are so many YouTube videos that, you can learn how to do absolutely anything. And I did learn how to sew, but more on that later. I've got to say, I find this fraying technique so therapeutic. It's just so relaxing to do. And the lovely bit with this is that they came out two different colours, so you just never know what's going to happen with them. Now, I could have left the display just like that, but we were having friends over for a lunch in the next few days, and I like to set my table well in advance. I was so pleased with how these turned out. Out of one curtain, I made 8 of the placemats, and I also made 8 napkins as well. And we've carried on using them, and they have washed brilliantly. So, super cheap way. £5, 2 curtains, so that's £2.50. This is white ironstone, and I mean genuine white ironstone. It's vintage burley ware, and it's in the Davenport design of embossed strawberries and grapes. It was actually found at auction in a job lot. I thought I was buying one box for £35. In fact, it turned out there were 4 boxes and 196 pieces. Ah, be still my beating heart. I love that it's all at different stages of aging, and some of the really older pieces have taken on this gorgeous cream luster. I found these green glasses in a charity shop. There were 8 of them, and I think I paid 50p each, so 8 for just £4. No fancy napkin folding for me. It's just a case of fold and roll and tie with twine. When I first showed this technique of making the napkins out of curtains, somebody commented, said, "Oh my God, that's disgusting." Couldn't quite get to the bottom of why it was so disgusting. I mean, they'd been through a very hot wash, as all napkins would be. All napkins are made of fabric. But as the old saying goes, "Nout's a queer as folk." Time to leave the table and move over to my big white dresser. Now, this was an auction find, Big mahogany Mo. We absolutely love this. £80. I did a big makeover on her, and now she sits like a right old diva in the corner, just being adored. As the colour scheme had evolved into green and white, I pulled out all my old green vintage books. I buy these in job lots from auctions, and I picked up the last lot, hundreds of books, for just £10. I added some vintage finds that I'd picked up on my shop and haul videos. These planes were just £7.50. Had a little bit of paint on, which I got off, and then just finished them off in some dark wax. Another vintage find were these 2 shoe lasts. They're not an identical pair, but they were the pair for just £3. I could not believe my luck. So all I did was give them a little clean up and then finish them off again in the dark wax. I added some egg-shaped ornaments. These were actually bright silver Christmas decorations that I'd picked up from HomeSense years ago, and then I finished them in my faux stone effect. Some more vintage crockery. This was in a job lot at auction. It's got a little bit of damage on one side, so not in the best of conditions, but ideal to be planted up, and of course it colour coordinated with the scheme. I recycled the moss that I'd used on the narcissus pots. I really don't like anything going to waste. I like to eke out every drop of life out of something. And to spruce the moss up, I gave it a little spritz of water. A few snips of the pussy willow just finished the display off. The final touch was one of the reduced candles from HomeSense. If you're enjoying this episode so far, and trust me, there's still loads to come, so don't be scooting off, please. Please do just click on that thumbs up button because it really helps the algorithm know that you're enjoying it, therefore other people might. I was loving the effect of the pussy willow in the arrangement on the dresser, so I added a few to the pots on the table. Island styling now, and I've got 2 of them. It's so funny when you look back on these videos. This candelabra now is actually green. It was bright green in my summer decorating, and then I put some dark wax on it for the fall. So it's wonderful to see everything go through its transition. So for the big wooden island, we're going to plant up this gorgeous old Royal Doulton bowl that I picked up for an absolute song. Just £15 from a charity shop. Now, when I first did this, somebody did comment and say, but how are you going to water it? Where is the drainage? There are no holes in the bowl. Actually, it's the pea beach at the bottom that acts as the drainage, and you're just careful with the amount of water that you put in. I added some fresh moss and some pussy willow. It's good to keep that continuity, to keep repeating, and then it helps tie a scheme together. It's also handy if you can find somebody strong to help you move everything. It's really quite a workout, this decorating lark. In the corner of the sink island, I normally use a tray, although at the moment I've got a big set of scales there that I used from the Christmas styling. I used the green bowl that I'd picked up in the charity shop. This was actually by a local pottery, and it's not a mass-produced item, so it was such a lovely find, that. This jug came from, again, one of my job lots at auctions. They're really interesting picking up these job lots. Baby's breath I added without any water, as I wanted it to dry back so I could keep on using it through the styling. Over to this corner of the kitchen now. I was quite happy with the look and feel there. It felt very light, very spring-esque. The wreath actually just needed a little tweak just to freshen it up. So I did nothing more than just add little snips of the baby's breath. I didn't use any glue or any wire, just poked it in. The wreath itself is just an old wreath base. And then I got 2 super cheap garlands off Amazon. I'll link them below. Wrapped those around, added some little odd bits of greenery that I had, and some of the covered wire spirals that I love to do. You'll see those come up later in the video. And I think the overall effect just gave it that lovely spring frothy feel. Over to the other side of the kitchen now and to the big pine dresser that we've got over there. I had this dress for winter and I'd had the twigs in, and I really actually quite enjoyed the movement of that. So I decided I'd just spruce them up a little. I pulled out a few supplies from the garage. So I've got an extension lead, my glue gun, glue sticks. I also brought out plenty of the finger protectors because I am forever burning myself on hot glue. I got a couple of these garlands off Amazon. I mean, the vines themselves are naff, but the actual blossoms are lovely. I've used the pink variety in the past, and again, you will see that come up later in this episode. And the white ones actually looked fabulous, so definitely using that. The vines went to the recycling. So once I got myself securely perched up there, I just glued the blossom heads onto the twigs. Now, I know my friends out in America, you can go into Hobby Lobby and buy all these fabulous faux branches, but it's more difficult to do that here in the UK, so this is my workaround. It's the old vessel in a vessel trick here. So I've put water in the vase and I'm putting the vase into the big stone pot because it's quite porous. I want to add some of the pussy willow, and I want this in water in the hopes that it will start to root. If the pussy willow does start to root, and I quite often change the water as well, keep it nice and clean, then I will take it out, cut it down to about 12 inches and pop it into compost. Sometimes they take, sometimes they don't, but I have had a few that have taken. I've then kept potting them on, and then when I want to bring them back in the house to style with them, I just select a nice basket to sit them in. And, you know, sometimes you might want to decorate that a little bit more, so I'll use some Hessian just to wrap around the top, and it hides, you know, any plastic pot that they're in. Once that season is over and they start to come out into leaf, then if I don't need them in the house anymore, they go back outside and the whole cycle just gets repeated. I love a bit of free decorating. And this tree has continued to grow. It's now over 8 feet tall. It's in a huge pot just outside the kitchen window. In fact, I planted it up in the plastic to stone pot that I did, where I used my outdoor stone effect. So I'll link that video below in case you haven't seen it. Let's go further back in time now, back to 2023 and another tablescape. This was pre-painting the kitchen table, and this one has a lot more colour. And yes, the obsession with measuring the position of the runner is a lifelong obsession. Although I'm surprised at how I did not pull those chairs back. It really does make life so much easier for yourself when you're trying to work around a table. What was I thinking? For For this particular year, I went with dianthus, and in theory, these should live for years and years. However, the theory doesn't take into account that you have deer that regularly visit your garden and use your borders like a smorgasbord. Using the same rustic ribbon, I told you I love recycling and using things again and again. And I alternated the position of the bow so it wasn't all bows on one side and then all flat on the other. It's that attention to detail. In this design, I use the vintage burley-ware again, but now I'm thinking red-pink transfer wear, the huge collection that I got at Christmas. That's going to be fabulous for my spring 2025 styling. I'm also loving the colour, so I think you're going to see more colour this year from me. I do like to use mismatched glassware as well. So again, I think that's something I'm going to take forward this year and ideally try and find more coloured glass. Now I can sew and I've got a sewing machine. I may make some different styles of napkins. Having said that, I really do love the frayed effect. So who knows? The cut flower bed wasn't giving when I was doing this design, it wasn't ready. So I did some wild picking in our field. And obviously I own the land, so I can pick wildflowers in it. And if you don't have bud vases or you don't have enough of them, use jam jars, use old jars. Nobody will be able to tell the difference once the flowers go in. I have quite a collection of brass candlesticks now. My collection has grown considerably since this was filmed. And I've still got some of these sand and fog sunflower candles. So maybe they'll come out this spring. A little tip here, if your candle is too big for your candle holder, just put a flame underneath and gently warm that wax up. Let it drip down into the holder and then put the candle in with some gentle pressure and it will mould into the shape and stand firm. Loving this throwback, jolly, colourful table. I then went on to elevate it for Easter, so I created a little bit of space in the middle for something else to go in. Down to my field again, the field that just keeps on giving. This time it's not pussy willow, it's twisted willow. We are so fortunate to have this corkscrew willow tree in the field. So I'd taken a branch off the floor. I tend to only pick up the ones that have blown down. Give it a very light dusting with white and pink paint, and then hung these Easter eggs that I'd picked up at the end of the previous Easter in a sale for something like 80% off, which is always the best time to be buying your decorations, quite frankly, and popped it into a vase that I'd done one of my very early stone effects on. on that trip, on the after Easter sale shopping, I picked up these eggs and they were in cardboard trays. I thought they were just loose. So when I got them home, I worked out they were actually stuck. So I ripped the cardboard carton apart. And for this styling, it was absolutely fine because they just tucked into the pot so you couldn't see the glue and the cardboard. But they will come out again later in this episode where they'll be given a makeover. So please do let me know in the comments below, would you like to see my spring styling incorporating a lot more colour than I normally do? Are you feeling the need for colour in your life at the moment? Back to last year, and let's do another design on the table. So this isn't going to be a full place setted table. This is just going to be a design reusing what I already have. And I do that all the time, just moving things around the house. So the big pot on the side there, I'm going to bring over to the table. But because this table had been freshly painted, I didn't want it to be scratched in any way. So the placemats that you saw in the pink and yellow design, they're being reused here, and I'm going to be popping a few bits on there. So I would always encourage people to look at what they already own. Can you just use it in a different location, group it with different things? Do you need to maybe add some paint, add some wax, change the colour of something to give it a new look and feel? Don't please rush out to the shops first of all. Going out to the shops is the very last thing you need to do. You need to work out where your gaps are. What is it that you need? You might actually need something as simple as different coloured candles or some thrifted material that you could make a tablecloth out of, or some napkins or placemats, as I've shown you earlier. It could be something very, very small, and it can be the whole key to a brand new scheme, all fresh and feeling fabulous and costing you hardly anything. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to leave the kitchen table like that. I've rounded up these Angelica stems that I bought from Home Sense in one of my summer shop and hauls. These were just £2.99, reduced from £42. And I use them all year round, all over the house. Walking sticks, or canes as my American friends call them. These walking stick stroke canes have been a little bit of a project of mine, and I have been collecting them over this last year from various charity shops, generally paying no more than about £2 for each one. I did use them in my Christmas decorating. You will see them later in the porch decorating in this episode. But when I did this display, I can't tell you, honestly, it filled me with so much joy. I just absolutely loved the effect that it created. We're going to leave the kitchen now and go up to the snug. So this is a room that is just off the kitchen. It's very much a relaxing room. There's no TV in here. we'll meet here for a drink, we'll sit and have a chat, we'll curl up in front of the fire, read a book. Now, I've stripped everything out that I want to take out, so all the winter styling that I'd done has been removed, apart from a couple of chosen pieces, and this is one of Bertie's proudest finds. Found this antler and he just adores it. Because I'd stripped the table after the luncheon that we'd had and redressed it, we've got some more pots that we can decorate with. So I'm going to pull that theme through into the snug and give it a little bit of a twist. As we move over into this corner of the snug, I'm thinking I might switch this up a little bit for the spring, for 2025. I love the wreath down there and I love the little console bench that I picked up at auction. It's modern, but it was under £30 and it just fits that space perfectly. Quite like the layered mirrors as well. But I've got two big picture frames that I did. You'll have seen that. I think it was last autumn that I did them, and I've still not got round to hanging them. So I'm thinking in this corner is going to be ideal for those. Now, again, it's the old vessel in a vessel because this is a terracotta pot and it's not going to be porous. I took clippings from the field to put into that pot. And as time is going on, you know, little things start sprouting. We had some elder that was starting to come out. So thought that would be a nice addition. Also, we've got a cherry blossom and a magnolia. Now, these magnolia branches are just superb and they just seem to look beautiful all year round. Even when they're completely bare, they're a beautiful structure. Then you get those lovely velvety buds on them and then the huge white flowers. So I love plants like that, plants, trees that are visually interesting all year round. Needed something to go in the middle here, and fortunately in a charity shop I'd picked up this really unusual glass dish for just £7.50, and of course with the green it blended in perfectly. But I wanted to add a little bit more to it. So we went about hunting for moss in the garden, which is not a difficult task where we live, and particularly at this time of year because it rains and rains and rains. I'm always desperate to get that first cut of the lawns, and here you can see we've not managed it by this stage because it had been just so wet. I've got another area where we get a huge huge amount of moss. And then my husband, I remember telling you this story, my husband decided he was going to be so helpful and he cleared this path of moss. I think I actually wept. He spent a long time on the naughty step because the moss grows here like a carpet. So you can come in with a spatula and just lift up great swathes of it. And it's perfect for decorating. I don't think he'll be that helpful in the future. Or rather, I'm hoping he won't be. Now, remember those eggs from earlier, the ones that had glue and cardboard all over them? Well, here's how I gave them a little mini makeover. So, in order to get the glue off, I found that once I'd got them into a bowl and covered them in really quite warm water, so not absolutely boiling, but certainly quite warm, I found within a few minutes the glue started to melt. So it was fabulous. I could just pick it straight off. It did take some of the pink covering off, but that wasn't too much of a problem, as I planned on painting them anyway. So after thoroughly drying, I pulled out some little test pots that I had. I actually bought these just for a couple of pounds in a charity shop. So a project like this is fabulous for any little bits of paint that you've got left over. I used a cocktail stick to spike holes in a bit of cardboard, and that was going to be my drying station. In the end, I didn't use the red paint. I just went with the 3 different greeny neutral tones. And then to create the speckles, I took a little bit of Enfleur, mixed it with water, and then used a nail brush which had really quite stiff bristles to create the splattering speckle effect. And I always find with projects like this, just ease your way into them. So I was really quite timid to start with until I got my finger action going, and then that was it. I was firing them out the park. Over to this side of the room now and to this round side table, which is still in this position. I found this in one of my favourite charity shops and it was just £5. Couldn't believe the price of it. But the top was really badly marked. So I took a sander to it and white wax, and within a few hours, it was beautiful. I added some magnolia to the faux stone pot that I did. And the magnolia branches, once they'd opened up, flowered and then dropped. I kept the branches and I'm still styling with them to this day. Next to the bust, I put a Welsh butter press. This was an antique that I picked up at the Malvern Fair. Next up is some fabrics for my big sofa. This 8-foot sofa I originally found on eBay. It's a Duresta, and over the years I've had it covered in different fabrics. Bertie, if you're wondering where he is at this moment in time, he'd just been out for a big swim, so he was getting a bit of hair and makeup. He absolutely adores the hairdryer. So for the fabrics, I decided I wanted to go much lighter. So I have these big chunky knit blankets. I originally got one as a brand promotion. I loved it so much. I went out and bought a few more with my own hard-earned money, not as gifted things. And these are available on Amazon, so I will link them below. And I absolutely love them. I just moved different cushion covers around the house so I could have that whole cream, light, airy feel to the sofa and also dial back on the grey. Now, whilst we're on the subject of fabrics, I did go down to my local charity shop and I came across this one. And for £1, well, it was worth a punt, wasn't it? And as luck would have it, it was exactly the size of the cushion that I normally have on this chair. So I thought that's going to be ideal. The fabric that I'd picked up earlier coordinated beautifully with it, so that got my old brain cells working. And I thought, I wonder if I could do some cushion covers. And remember, at the time, I didn't have a sewing machine, didn't know how to make a cushion cover. So I watched some YouTube videos on how to make cushion covers using tape. And I couldn't believe it. I actually pulled it off. I was cock-a-hoop. And that gave me the impetus to actually learn how to do it properly. That and a few lovely viewers saying, you can do it. It's not that difficult. And do you know what? They were right. Next up is some coffee table styling. Now, this 6-foot table used to be our dining room table until I turned it into a coffee table. I had this bowl from auction. It was in one of these job lots again. And I had originally intended on doing my faux stone effect on it because I didn't really like the gold trim. I'm so glad I didn't because I love it now. And I've used it in so many of my styling projects. And this time it made a perfect planter for the coffee table. This is a great project for all those lovely bits of china that you've got that you keep for the special occasions, deep in the back of the cupboards. Well, every day is a special occasion for me at the age I'm at now. And if I love something, then I want to use it. I want to see it. I want to enjoy it. The bowls are not going to get hurt. They're not going to get damaged in any way. Yes, they'll need a really good wash afterwards. But hey ho, that's a small price to pay for the amount of enjoyment you will get from it. The polyanthus that I'm using here are the ones that came off the kitchen table. And because I don't like waste, I'm reusing the pussy willow as well that were in those pots. Now, at this end of the table, I like to use a big wooden tray. I've had this for a few years now, and it's just the perfect size for this table. So it lives on here quite often. I often think, if something's not broken, don't try and fix it. This works really well in this place. Now, this platter that I'm using here was from one of my shop and hauls, and with the maker's marks on the back, I managed to identify that it was made in 1890, so it's well and truly antique. Remember, if it's over 100 years old, it's antique. If it's under 100, it is vintage and collectible. The cream jug is not antique. I've had that for some time. It's the modern replica. But I put it on there because I like the tones in it and the shape and the size worked with the display. The gypsum filler came from the kitchen table. It was just such good value buying that. I was able to bring it through all of the decorating along with a few of Bertie's finds. And talking about Bertie, I do decorate a lot with him in mind. He loves to snuggle up underneath the coffee table. So the fur throws have got to go down. He loves these sheepskins. Over to the sideboard now, and this is definitely going to get painted this year. I've been saying it for so long. It used to be black and it's all started chipping but not in a nice way, and I don't really want the black showing through. So this is definitely a spring 2025 project. But in the meantime, let's have a look at how I styled it last year. To the jug, I added another magnolia branch. Now, after a few days of being in the house, being in the warmth, the buds started to open up and we had this beautiful display of white flowers. Then the flowers dropped off and again I kept the branch, and with the other one I'm still styling with them now. Now the lamps, they were originally a £7.50 each find from my local charity shop, and this is how they used to look, and I did the faux stone effect on them, used lots of the coir bean string. Everything is listed below, all the links if you want to buy anything, including the light bulbs, super sexy light bulbs. And I know lots of you love these light bulbs, but unfortunately I can only find the links to them in the UK. If I do find them for the US and other Amazon sites, then I will add those links. The last of the polyanthus from the kitchen table were brought up and put into the windows on top of the very large candlesticks that once upon a time were pink, and I darkened with dark wax. And then I wrapped these green ribbons round. Now, watching this now, I'm thinking this time I need to go much longer on my tails. I did that at Christmas and I love that kind of cascading ribbon coming down. So note to self, it's going to be long tails on ribbons. Let's leave the snug there now, but be assured we will come back to it later this year for more decorating. Into the sitting room now. At this stage, it still had all its winter decoration. You can see the Angelica there before it got moved to the kitchen table. Lots of fur and also a big sheepskin rug that Bertie does not want to be taken out. I am literally taking it out for cleaning, Bertie. That is all. He's such a precious prince, just loves his comfort. So the room was prepped and everything was taken out, apart from the items that I quite happily live there. I had a couple of other sheepskin rugs that temporarily, to keep the little prince happy, were slid underneath the coffee table because this is yet another one that he loves to creep underneath. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is his home too, and he needs to be as comfortable as the humans. I followed the same theme with the fabrics in here, again trying to scale back that grey and using the chunky knit blankets and light coloured cushions. Now I am thinking about possibly putting in a corner sofa, an L-shaped sofa. I've never owned one, so I have no experiences of them. So what do you think? Do you think something, I'm thinking more traditional, not very modern or contemporary, but please let me know your experiences with them if you've had corner sofas. I do hear mixed comments on them that you've kind of got to pick an end and it can be difficult. I don't know. Do you think it would work? Am I going to like it? In the corner between these two sofas, I'm still using this as a side table. So this was found in a charity shop for just £5. Oh, I don't know how these bargains find me, but they just do. I did a quick repair on it with some coir bean string, glue, clamps, and it tidied it all up. So just a case of doing a little bit of styling on it now. I quite often layer open books on top of each other as a riser. It's just a technique that I really visually like. And as you know by now, I like to take clippings from the garden. And at this time of year, in the March, laurel is just starting to flower. So I will quite often come down here first thing on a morning in my PJs with my doggie, and we do some clippings and then I'll go and decorate with them. Now, I'm looking at this arrangement here, and at the time I was really pleased with it. I'm looking at it now thinking, whoa, that is way too understated. You need to put in a lot more in that area and with some height. Note to self. This is such a useful exercise, going back over these videos, looking at the work that I've done in the past and making notes on it. So what I would say, I don't suppose you have videos in this format unless you're a content creator, but just look back over old photographs and videos of social gatherings you may have had, but look at them from the perspective of looking at the styling and really critique yourself, because it can only help going forward. If you're coming into the house via the boot room, then you have to walk past this little window. So I always like to put candles in here, and I use these battery operated candles. I'm a complete convert to them. I was an absolute, had to be a wax candle. These are amazing. I'll link them below. This ingle nook is the only thing when we did a big build here that didn't change position. Everything else, every other wall moved. And this part of the house goes back to the 1730s, so it's a very old part of the house. I'm using another one of these large heavy twig wreaths. I think I bought 5 of these in total from HomeSense. I'm not actually going to put too much spring decor, if you like, in the ingle nook, because we still do use it all the way through the year, and particularly at this time of year it's still very, very chilly. I am, however, going to add one of my finds, which is this giant plane. I gave it a clean again and finished it in dark wax, and it's just a lovely old piece of wood. Again, I'm going to pop in a couple of these faux candles that I absolutely adore, and the best part is that they come with a remote control. Some more coffee table styling ideas now. I've got this old tray. I've had it for quite a while. I did a paint effect on it and then created a crackle glaze with glue. Any of the DIYs that I mention will be in some of the compilation videos that I've done. So again, I'll link those down below. Another one of Bertie's finds. Oh, he loves having his finds displayed. It's like having a child and putting the artwork on the fridge, you know. On top of the books, I popped a candle, again, that I got from HomeSense, from the reduced section. This is the same as the one in the snug, just £5. This copper dish was a lovely find. It was in a charity shop. I think it was when I went shopping in Lewis, and it's actually an old milk churn lid. So the styling in this room is very understated for me, but you don't always have to go completely over the top. Although, to be honest with you, I love being over the top. I love to stretch the limits and really experiment with things. But if that's not your style, then you don't have to. You just have to style in the way that makes you smile, which is what I always say. Let's have a little throwback to some styling that I did in here the year before, which again was 2023. So the cherry blossom, the magnolia, and the trees are really starting to come on. We're a bit further into March now. And I like to take cuttings, as you know, but when I do take big cuttings like this, they tend to be from areas that are going to get cut back anyway. My cut flower bed at this stage was producing lots of lovely tulips, ideal for snipping back and decorating with. These are actually the bulbs that were then lifted and transplanted into the field that the deer came along and completely ate the lot of. So we will see this spring if they grow back in the field, or did they end up killing them? I'm hoping not. I hope the bulbs have survived with, enough juice in them to produce flowers again, which the deer will probably eat. Anyway, back to happier days with tulips. The tulips I'm picking here are Tulip Green Star, and I'm going to do an arrangement with those. I've also picked some Narcissus Silver Chimes, and they smell absolutely heavenly. I've got a £3 vintage cream jug from a charity shop, which I don't think you can ever go wrong with, and some of the burley-ware that's badly chipped, no good for food, but ideal for a project like this. I like to give my flowers vodka, generally, and money, and particularly with tulips. Now, these went bolt upright for 2 weeks after a shot of vodka and some pre-1982 copper coins. As I want this bowl to be on the coffee table, I don't want a high arrangement. So I'm cutting the tulips quite short and then very carefully turning each of the petals outwards. It will give me a beautiful low display and everybody can still watch the TV. The coffee table that I use in the sitting room was actually a table and I bought it at auction, cut the legs down and then just gave it a very light sand and finished it off with white wax. The tray I'm using here you will have seen in the last episode where it changed colour and went onto my office desk, and this one went behind the range in the kitchen. In the magazines that I'm putting out on the table here, there's actually a big feature of the house. It was our first full colour in print feature on the property. Fortunately, we've gone on and had a couple of more features in different magazines. Now, I don't like the front cover, I don't like the colours on it, so I popped some sheet music over just to disguise it. And here are the girls flouncing their way in, full of alcohol and money. The sheepskins regularly get a brush with Bertie's dog brush. We're going to say goodbye to the sitting room now, but again, we'll be back in here later this year with more styling. Now we're going to move into the hallway, which is often a space that's given corridor status. You know, I think we forget that the hallway is a room in itself and it needs to be treated as such. It's a really important space. You know, it's a place for arrivals and departures. It sets the tone and it needs to leave an impression. Whenever I'm switching a space up for a season, what I tend to do is take out everything that is just not going to work in there anymore. Give what's left a really good clean, and then I can start bringing in the pieces that I want to be able to see in that space. And they might not necessarily be purely season specific. They may be just objects that I've had around the house in other rooms and I've thought, oh, I haven't seen you properly for a while. I don't know if you find it as well. I can move an object from one place to another and it just feels completely different. So this is why I love to keep moving things around. I made this wreath some years ago with some whips from the field, and I'm having a hankering to make some more, so that's definitely going on my to-do list. Now, this corner of this old workbench is, as you can see, made up of different levels, different planks, and I've found the easiest way to style this end is to pop a tray over to create this level base. Whenever I'm out and about, I'm always looking at stoneware, at earthenware, at pottery, and these lovely little vessels have found their way into my home, but I think we need to do a little bit more to them. So as you may well know, if you've been with me for a long time, my son is a professional golfer and we have copious amounts of golf balls. And one lovely viewer once suggested to me some time ago, oh, why don't you make moss balls out of them? Well, I am eternally grateful because I've done this several times, just moss from the garden, taking florist wire and wrapping it around and around in all different directions until you get a really firm fixing. You just snip it off at the end, give it a couple of twists, and then I've found through experience just to stop that moss going brown, just to periodically spritz it with some fresh water. It was time to head back to the supermarket because we'd run out of gypsum filler. So the baby's breath needed replenishing and another couple of bundles, £2 each. Not exactly going to break the bank, is it? Back down into the field as well because I needed to cut some more pussy willow. But this time I decided I wasn't going to put it into water, didn't want this to root. I just wanted it to dry back so I could keep on using it year after year. The vintage cricket ball that lives on the corner here, my daughter used as a stress ball through all her examinations, and she did fabulously well. And yes, the vise on the bench is a working vise. I get asked so often, does it really work? But to be honest with you, the only times I really use it are when I'm gluing something together or to hang my handbag on. Let's move across the hallway now to this dresser. And this mirror in particular, this was a gilt mirror. It was an auction find, and there is a full tutorial on how I did it in the very first video that I did this year, which was my 100 DIY compilation video. So if you fancy snuggling up on the sofa for 2.5 hours, in fact, over 2.5 hours of wall-to-wall DIY, then please do go watch that one. Now, this next little tip I'm going to show you with the garland was so popular when I first showed this. People were, oh my goodness, I didn't even know, I didn't realize you could do that. I just took the garland, which my son had brought back from Hobby Lobby in America when he'd been out there filming, and I just took one end and started to wrap it around my hand again and again, almost creating a nest. And because this garland has lots of different strands hanging from it, the effect was so good that I do this all the time now. This is most of the time when I use this garland, this is the way that I use it. As I'm not using the pussy willow in the hallway in water, I'm able just to poke it into the vase through that garland and create my display like that. Another Bertie find. These are pheasant feathers. Obviously, the fox had supper. We found them on a golf course one evening when we were out running Bertie. And yeah, he was so excited to have discovered them. So they came back and I use them all the time in my decorating. The pheasant lives on. And of course, more gypsy filler, because that repetition just helps keep that scheme cohesive. I love a freebie, and this was most definitely a freebie. When we were building my big storage shed just before the build, this actually came up out of the ground, and I think it's a French bowl. It was suggested that it was French because of the shape of the handle. Either way, it coordinates really well in this spot. Back over to the other side of the hall now, and to this beautiful old French dresser and this frame, both of which were found at auctions, and I just coloured them up ever so slightly with some white wax. The dresser itself is 200 to 300 years old, French. Oh, hello, Bertie's putting in an appearance. He has his morning naps and he works his way around all the beds. Oh, that doggy has such a wonderful life. Let's get back to styling this dresser. Now on this side, I decided to put a piece that I did a makeover on. Not very long before this was filmed, Bertie and I had been down to Eastbourne. We'd love to come down here. It's an old Victorian seaside town. Used to bring the children down here when they were little, and I have many happy memories on the beach down here. And of course, Bertie loves it as well. And obviously, it would be rude not to pop into a few charity shops. I stumbled across this wooden piece. The shop had said that it had just been donated and somebody had been using it as a fruit bowl. I also picked up this terracotta jug. It was a really good size and only £3. Had lots of markings on, but we can sort those out. So back to this wooden piece. You could see all the staining in there, and I ummed and ahed about what to use to clean it. And in the end, I went with the easy off, the oven cleaner method. It was one of the first times I'd actually used this product because you can't really buy it in the UK. You can order it off Amazon, but it's not in our supermarkets. So I gave it a good coverage with the easy off. I worked in all those chemicals, and yes, they are very strong chemicals, so you do have to take all the precautions with it. Once I'd agitated it, I left it for about 20 minutes and then I got it down onto the ground, well away from any plants and flowers, well away from Bertie. He was most firmly indoors, and I gave it a really good hose down. I then repeated the whole process again. And after a night on top of the range to dry out, this is how it looked. How beautiful is that? Back over to the other side of the hallway now, and we're going to work on the mantle that is above the wood burner that we have in the hallway. Now, I had a plan for this, but it did involve going down to my storage shed. The porch here is coming up soon, so if you want some more entryway styling, please do stay around for that. Now, as I walk down to the shed, can you quickly just check if you are subscribed to the channel? Because I have about 70% of people who regularly watch my videos and they're not subscribed. It is free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps the channel. Thank you. Now, regulars will know that these sheds have actually changed colour. I did finally get round to colouring them up last summer, and last January, just a couple of months ago, I actually did some big shed organisation, so they look a little bit tidier now. This is what I was after at this point in time, though. I wanted this frame, and I was going to do just a little makeover on it. I took off the old fixings and then used the sander just to really give it a clean up and take a little bit of that grey paint off. So after a good wipe down just with a damp cloth, I decided I'd do a colour wash on it. So I was using Annie Sloan Cocoa, little scoop of that, just with some tap water, pretty much a 50-50 mix. And you just make sure that the paint is very much incorporated with the water. You don't need any fancy brushes to do this, just an old flat brush, and pretty much slap it on, darlings. You know, that's how you do a colour wash. You can use a rag just to pull back where you've got too much paint. And then I tend to pull out a hairdryer or a heat gun, and it just expedites that drying process. And then I finish the whole lot with lashings of white wax. And no, the ceiling is not straight. We're very much still on the old part of the house, so everything's all a bit screw-with. Or as I like to say, it's perfectly imperfect. I had an idea for something else I wanted to put on the mantle. Not just mirrors, windows. Now, these windows actually came from my mother-in-law's house. She is well into her 90s, completely independent, plays bridge for money every day, incredibly active, and decided she wanted to change her windows. Like at 92, I think she was 91 at the time. Anyway, she's been very good at house maintenance over the years. So these beautiful 1930s leaded light windows were so immaculately kept, and I really wanted that chippy look. So I took to distressing them. And the £3 terracotta jug, that cleaned up beautifully. I was so pleased with the way that mantle came together. I think the colour in the window and that terracotta jug just work beautifully together. Now, in this corner, I brought in my great big metal star. This was a Kempton Market find, and it was at a time when my son was at college in Texas, so I just had to buy it. Although looking at it now, I'm wondering if maybe I should change the colour slightly for the spring. And also that mirror, I think that's needing a bit of a makeover. If you saw my office makeover, you might have an idea of the colourway I'm thinking about for when I get round to spring styling in the hall this year. The furry supervisor, always keeping a watchful eye over proceedings. Now, down at this end of the hallway, we have what we call a reading nook. It's a lovely little area to sit with a book, with the light coming through. Just a nice, peaceful little spot. Now, in here, I've got a vase that I fell out of love with, and I had a load of old different white spray paints, and so I just kept layering it on wet, using the heat gun, using the hairdryer until it all started cracking and hazing. I brought in the second of mother-in-law's windows. It's actually worked really well on there, the window on the windowsill, as the sun comes round and it catches through that coloured glass. Absolutely beautiful. The books are chosen to colour coordinate with the window frame. I popped a little terracotta pot that I changed the colour of with chalk paint and wax, and then decided that actually it really needed something else, but what to put in it? Well, of course, the furry supervisor, forever the design genius behind this channel, came up with a brilliant idea. Let's take a tennis ball and wrap it in moss for a giant moss ball. That dog is a freaking genius. Absolutely wonder dog. And he loves a good butt scratch dance as well. As we were approaching Easter when I was decorating the hallway, remember those eggs from a couple of years ago that I did the Easter display with on the kitchen table? Well, they will go back into their boxes at the end of each season and come back out again. Waste not, want not. And of course, you don't have to use every colour. The yellow and the blue just didn't really work with the colours around. So they went back into the box, and I'm sure they'll be coming out again very soon. These chairs were a makeover. Originally, I bought 4 of them for £20 from auction. They were bright red and in a terrible condition. I did a paint and wax effect on them, and years later, they are still wearing beautifully. As I do a quick clean-up, Bertie's absolutely found his spot on that sheepskin. He loves laying there because the sun comes round and it's just a beautiful warm spot. Let's leave the indoors now and head outside and do the porch. Now, this is our front porch. We actually have 2 other porches, or what I call verandas. So we've got the main house veranda, and then we've got a guest cottage, and that has a veranda as well. But the styling on there tends to be much later in the spring going into the summer. So I think all that will get scooped up in a different episode. Here, we're going to do some small porch decorating, but just because it's small does not mean to say it won't make a statement. The big branches that I have at the front of the porch, I actually brought those up from the field in the autumn styling. So these are oak branches and I attached them to the front there as part of that decorating. I then kept them there for the Christmas decorating, covered them in lights and twigs, and they just look so fabulous that I thought, right, I'll keep them up and use them for spring. Now the twine there is decorative. They're actually held in position with cable ties. All the pots that you see at the front contain lace cap hydrangeas, and I just so look forward to the summer months with that beautiful shock of pink that we have there. But whilst I'm waiting for the colour to arrive, I like to bring a little bit of colour in the springtime, and I do that with a mixture of real and faux. So I've been down to my storage shed where I keep all my items, and I have quite a few of these very long boxes, long containers, and they've been fantastic for the florals because you can see everything and it really doesn't get squashed. You know, you've got all the lovely little heads are very easy to pack in these boxes. So I will link those down below. I bought a pink version of the vines that I showed you earlier in the kitchen, and they were really quite pink. But then I worked out, actually, if I wrapped some of the old blossom around, it would mimic the camellia, the cherry blossom, the inspiration that we have in the garden. By the time this was being filmed, the cherry blossom was starting to open up, the magnolia was opening, and all that beautiful spring frothiness was starting to happen. So that inspired me to pull out all my different blossom heads, all the ones that I wanted to use that year. And then with the very dark pink blossoms, they were going to have to come off the vine because, as we know, the vine is pants and it needs to go to the recycling. I was not feeling the use of leaves either. Some years I add leaves to them. Others, I just don't really want to. You know, you just go with the flow, don't you? So once I got them all apart, I then put everything into just a lightweight carrier bag because then it's much easier to go up the ladders with my glue gun and attach them all to the branches. Now, you may be wondering, why on earth doesn't she just put some nice plants either side of the porch, something that flowers in the spring? Well, the reason being is underneath all that pea beech is concrete. It is a hot mess. There was actually a conservatory on the front of the house when we first bought it, and so a huge concrete base. It would have been really expensive to dig that whole thing out. So I literally just covered up a multitude of sins by dumping tons of pea beech on top of it. Also, I like to have the choice. I like the variation. If I could plant either side, then I'm going to have the same thing year in, year out, only slightly bigger each time. This way, I get to choose every year what I want to do. So whilst I was busy gluing Blossom, hubby came out and did the first cut. Oh, it just looks so good and the smell is unbelievable. I just love that first cut of the season. It means spring is really here. Looking back on this now, I'm really happy with the effect, but I think this year I'm going to add more blossom, lots and lots of blossom. And I think I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. But back to what I did last year. So after a final sweep out of the inside of the porch, and before we get to doing a great big door wreath, we started to work on one side of the porch. And I love to use potato chitting trays. If you followed me for a while, you'll know I use these things almost like furniture. Side tables, console tables, coffee tables. I've built them all out of them. The last few years, I've used a mirror in the porch. I've got this lovely old one, 1930s mirror, and it's a really good quality one. I should probably actually be using it in the house, I think. In fact, I've got a project coming up this spring that involves a huge amount of mirrors, so I may well be pinching that one back out the porch and using it inside the house. Stay tuned for that. Another thing I like to use outside are wooden crates. I just find them incredibly versatile. And whether I'm decorating outside or inside, the principles are the same. I like to get my key items in position first before I start working in on the detail. Now, this old umbrella stand, it is still going. It's lost its bottom. I've shoved a bucket in. But year after year, I keep saying I'm going to get another one. And I do look for them. But this one just keeps on going. So in there, I'm adding umbrellas, walking sticks. Remember the canes from earlier from the kitchen table? It all started when I was on a shopping trip in Tenterden and I found these canes. I then went to another charity shop and found another bunch of them. And I've kept on collecting them through the year. And of course, using them in lots of different ways. The kitchen table, though, is my absolute favourite. I did do some at Christmas, if you saw that Christmas decorating. I just find them fun. They're just nice, jolly items. And whilst they're waiting for their different reincarnations in the house, their different styling, they live out here in this pot where they can chat to each other about all the lovely walks they've been on. Back to the storage shed, and another key item I wanted to use in that porch decorating was my deconstructed chair. This was a £3, get that, £3 fine from a charity shop. Originally I thought, oh, I'll reupholster that. And then actually as time has gone on, it's been fabulous in the outside decorating. Now, I wasn't quite sure at first which side to put it, but that was detail. It was a key piece. I knew it was going in. Back over to the other side where my key pieces are, and so now I can start going in with some detail. And these faux flowers, we don't get many good faux flowers in this country that are easily accessible and at a price that is reasonable. These were just 99 pence each. They were in Home Sense, massively reduced, and of course I had to grab them. Now, my first choice would always be decorating with fresh, but obviously we're still in March and as you've seen, there aren't huge amounts of pickings in the garden. Now, looking down on this looks a bit unsightly. So a trick I often use is taking some Hessian, because that works with my style. You could do any type of material, whatever works with your decorating tastes. And then just tucking it in and around. So when you look down on it, you don't see all the ugly stems. I brought out some lanterns, which I've had for more years than I care to remember. I think I actually got these in my 20s, and I'm not even going to start to tell you how many decades ago that was. I've also added a few terracotta pots. If you can think back earlier in this episode, you'll have seen terracotta pots coming into several of the rooms. So it's a material that I am pulling through the whole scheme. Again, because there isn't a lot of fresh ready, I'm just using a faux plant in the crate, and the bell is our doorbell. Let's move across to the other side of the porch now, where I've got this 5-foot sideboard. It actually houses all the doggy paraphernalia, all the things that you need easy access to, but you just don't want to be looking at. I brought a pot round that was starting to come into flower. There were leaves coming on it. It had a bit of colour. There was some London pride in there, so there would be some pink flowers coming through quite shortly. It was just a case of working out exactly how the whole thing was going to come together. In the end, I decided to put it into the chair, but obviously the shape of the big bush that was in there was cutting across the door, and we're going to do a big door wreath. And by the time it's fully dressed, it's going to be over 3 foot in diameter. I don't really do small. The one thing about this I was not loving was the plastic planter. So a simple solution is, again, pull the Hessian out. You need Hessian in your life. I have got sacks, but some of the sacks I've got are actually quite long and quite narrow. So with the shape of this pot, it does not look easy, but it was much easier to actually just pull the Hessian, feed it all the way around, and that way it would just completely disguise the plastic. It needs a friend, but what to put next to it? I have an area where I bring on all my hydrangeas. I have a bit of a hydrangea habit, and they were starting to come into leaf, starting to grow. So I brought one round that's in a bucket, but I wanted to cover that soil. So the simplest way to do that is with moss from the garden. I'd already had some that had been in the bucket for quite some time, so a little bit of a spritz with water just helped to freshen it up, although not strictly necessary because, of course, it's a hydrangea, it's going to get watered. And for some more visual interest, I added some pussy willow. Again, it's repeating materials, it's bringing that theme through, it's making it a cohesive scheme. And to help link the two sides of the porch together, I've brought some more terracotta pots in. And I'll do them in a tumbling terracotta pot type of way. I do love these little pots. I bought them in a job lot from auction, and I don't just use them for styling. I do actually plant them up, so they get practical use as well. And now another little throwback to styling of this dresser on a previous year. I popped some bulbs into some old biscuit tins that I got from Costco. I was going to plant them in the ground, and then I just ran out of time. So rather than waste the bulbs, I chucked them into all these tins, and they grew. So I'm using a crate here that I picked up at the auctions. The pussy willow, as you can see, is a little bit further advanced, so it's starting to open out. And I was sliding the pussy willow into the jars in the water, and some of it did actually root. So I have got some more trees on the way. So if you've got some old biscuit tins that you like the design of, or, any old tins, all I tend to do is turn them upside down, use a screwdriver and a hammer and just puncture a couple of little holes in for drainage, and they make great planters. Back to last year's porch that we were decorating. And before we go on to do the giant door wreath, I just love doing these big wreaths. Let me take you on a little walk with Bertie. We quite often walk in this area. It's so beautiful in the spring. It's actually an old house that is now a hotel, and there are lovely lakes around it. And of course, Bertie being a Labrador, just can't resist. Time to make my big door wreath, and I've been back down to my storage shed and pulled out some more of my supplies, these long containers that I just love using for the florals. The ring that I'm using, the wreath base, is actually from Costco, and it's got to be about 10, 12 years old now. It's made of straw. I just keep wrapping it in a burlap, in a Hessian, and it keeps on going. All the faux, I haven't bought anything new for doing this wreath. I'm just using old supplies, a mixture of faux and dried. So I do dry a lot, particularly at the end of the summer, going into the fall, and you get all these wonderful heads. We grow lots of hydrangeas, which I change the colour with spray paint. And as we were going into spring, I thought a nice pink would be good. I have got the glue out, although I don't use too much glue when I'm doing the wreath. I tend to use wire, and I use one length of wire all the way around. Another thing I love about this wreath base is it actually has a hook embedded into it. Now, let's just have a quick check on Bertie, see if my furry supervisor wants to come out and help. Well, I'm guessing the answer is no, obviously because he's a very clever dog and he knows that it's going to start raining. And yes, it did. The vagaries of the English weather just got all set up to do it, and then we get a downpour. As I like to use one continuous length of wire, I do go for a decent thickness because I'm going to be pulling quite hard, to pull everything in. And the last thing you want is for the wire to snap mid-wreath. I like to put together little bundles, fluffing as I go, always bringing everything as much to life as possible. The hydrangea heads are wonderful to use on a wreath like this because they're so big. They cover such a surface area. As I start to build up and layer up, I'm not too worried about any gaps at this stage because I'll sort all of that at the end, and normally with hydrangea heads, and that's what the glue gun is for. If you're interested in how I grow so many hydrangeas, how I preserve them, cut them, how I propagate them, I do have a couple of hydrangea videos, so I will link them in the description box below. Please do check out that description box because there's always a wealth of information in there. That's where you'll find all the links to the products that I use, particularly those that are available on Amazon, as I am an Amazon associate. So what that means is that if you click on those links and then you go and buy those products on Amazon, it's not going to cost you anything extra, but I get a tiny little percentage, and all of that accumulates, and it just helps me to keep on making videos like this for your enjoyment that you can watch for free. So if you'd like to really support the channel, that's a super easy way that you can do it. As I'm working around the wreath, I do quite often pick it up and hold it up, see how it's looking, how it's balanced. I like to keep the top of the wreath at the very center of the table again so I can see how it's balancing. Now, as I'm working on these peonies here, I can see there are just two of the darker ones, which is not going to work. So rather than disturb the whole wreath, I've just used the wire snippers to take one out. I work around the wreath in the same direction, but when I come to the end, in order to close it up, I tend to use a large hydrangea head in the opposite direction, and that tends to do the job. When I'm tying it off, I find it much easier to pull it to the edge of the bench rather than picking it up and then just tying it off there. Once that is done, I really need to stand back and have a good look at it. So it's over to the garage door and I hang it up on there and we'll see what tweaks it needs. This is the point where I like to check for gaps. And there was one here, so no problem. We just take a hydrangea head, pop some glue on it, and that will sort that one out. At this point, I wanted to do a material repeat in order to tie it into the overall spring theme running throughout the house. And of course, baby's breath gypsophila was going to be perfect for the job. I also brought out some covered wire and I use this for making spirals. Spirals. I love adding these to displays. Now, I've got an ice cream scoop and the handle is the perfect size for me to make these. So I just wrap it round and round and round until I get the desired length. I leave a little tail, snip that off, and then I can use that tail to poke it in. One final thing to do is use hairspray, and that actually helps reduce the shedding on the hydrangea petals. As always, Bertie is quality checking the work and, yup, paw of approval. High five. Let's leave the porch there and we'll move on to another outdoor space, and this is a throwback to outdoor kitchen decorating. Very early in the season, I picked up, just from the local supermarket, geraniums and some small herbs, which I knew that I could grow on. This is my outdoor kitchen. It was all built from scraps. I didn't go out and buy anything specific for it. It all started with this countertop that I found behind the sheds when we first moved in here. Now, it had been filthy, obviously, through the winter. It was time to give it a clean. I hate cleaning. I'd rather paint a room than clean a room. But, you know, sometimes it's just got to be done. This pink stuff is amazing as well. Cleaned the whole outdoor kitchen with it. And it just brought it up like a shiny new pin. We made the doors from the pallets that the cladding on the main house actually came on. They were so heavy duty that it was criminal to waste them. So I thought we are definitely going to be able to use them. I used handles just off old pieces of furniture and then just kept the cupboards like really basic and practical. I reused things that we already had. So the barbecue, we took it off its stand, spread it out, built it in. The egg here, that was an Aldi find for just a couple of £100, and it's actually sat on a grate, a manhole cover, and then I use breeze block around the sides of it just to create that housing. And the countertop at that end is actually paving slabs that we lifted up when we were creating this area. The free pussy willow tree that I had in the kitchen very early on is actually over there in the corner, growing happily in my plastic to stone pot. And this is a couple of years ago, so it's actually so much bigger now. I must, in this year's styling, give you an update on that because it has grown like crazy. The cane furniture out here just came from a local charity shop. I think I paid something like £25 for it. The table was an auction find, and the chairs all around, they were originally kitchen chairs from several houses ago, and they'd just been sat in the storage. Didn't really want to use them in the house. They just were a bit too modern for me. So they're ideal out here, and they have now weathered down to a gorgeous silver grey. I really have no qualms about using indoor furniture outside, as long as it's not precious. Regular viewers will recognise this tray. It went for a makeover last summer and went green and now lives out on the cottage veranda. And watching the styling here, I am really getting inspired to use a lot more herbs this spring and summer, both inside and outside. So that is definitely going on my to-do list. Now a little bit of shelf styling. I designed and made the tap with my plumber, and the sink is an old jam pan. The herbs look so diddy here, but they grew so well. It's a really economical way. Buy them from the supermarket where they cram so many of them into these little pots. Break open the pot and split them between lots of different ones, and they grow on as long as you look after them. Ladies, need I say more? The Costco biscuit tins were ideal to use in this area because of the red in them. They colour coordinate, and we love a bit of colour coordination here. The big lantern here was one of 4 that I picked up off eBay when I was doing the renovation of the cottage. And this one, the electrician and I decided to sit it on the countertop and actually use it more like a lamp. So we added a flex to it, dropped it down, put an outdoor socket on. Now, wonderful outdoor sockets, but I don't want to see them. So A picture propped up there soon sorts that problem. Thank you so much for joining me, and please do come back and watch the 2025 Spring Decorating series, which is starting very soon. Take care.